So starting a few months back, started reading a book to my kids during school time called Children and the Supernatural. And it's a book about true accounts of kids unlocking the power of God through visions, healing, and miracles. So we started doing that, and I will say a verse that God gave me from the beginning, and all that I'm fixing to say, was in Ephesians 6:13, doing all to stand, stand therefore. So the day after Christmas, my kids had Christmas money and the girls wanted to go shopping, see if they could find some good deals. We weren't there for very long, and at the end, they wanted to go into the food court, and so we did that. During that time, my 10-year-old daughter, Hannah Grace, passed out. It was a very scary 15-20 minutes. What you have to understand is that I have 5 kids, and we have been very blessed with healthy kids. We have very rarely had to take them to the doctor for anything. We've just been really blessed. But they did encourage us to take her to the doctor to be checked out because this had never happened before. The next morning, I called her primary care physician to set up an appointment, and they got her in that very day. Now, her regular doctor was out of town because it was the holidays, but the doctor on call decided that he wanted to schedule an MRI, an echocardiogram. They did an EKG, and they did blood work. After all those things that day, the things that checked out quickly and could be did check out, and then we were waiting on blood work and other things. So we went home, and of course it's the holiday time, so now we're at New Year's. On New Year's Day, to say there were a few things that came up abnormally on her blood work. They were looking at possible low blood sugar and a couple of other things that he wanted me to follow up with her normal doctor, and so we went ahead and set up that appointment. The next day, I did get to talk to her primary care physician. She went over a couple of the lab work with me and decided that she did want to repeat some of that blood work. So that was on the 2nd when I talked to the doctor. We set up the other appointment. And on January 4th and January 7th, we got the call that MRI was clear, echocardiogram was clear. And then we wait.
On the 10th is when her follow-up appointment is, and they do the blood work. At 7 o'clock that night, the same day that we went to the doctor, Lisa and I are on our way to go clean the church, and I get a call. And it's a call that no parent wants to get because it's after hours. So the doctor called, and she doesn't like what she sees in the blood work, and she wants more blood work done ASAP. She mentions leukemia, possibly, and the likelihood that they will need to do a bone marrow biopsy.
And that we might want to prepare our 10-year-old for the possibility of that. So that night, before I went to go clean the church, sent a message to some of my friends asking for prayer, and then I went to my husband's work to share with him the news. I knew this was not something I could share on the phone. So I went in and I told him what was going on and what the doctor had said. We took a moment, we sat down and we joined hands and we prayed. Then I left to go and clean the church, praying. I did cry some. The next morning, my mom went with me to take my daughter to go to Children's ER. Before we went, my dad, who is an elder at our church, anointed her and prayed over her. And then on the way to the appointment, our pastor called and he talked with her. She was quite matter of fact that God has been protecting her from the beginning and that he had her in his hands. When we got there, they took 8 tubes of blood. Then we were told that the lab work some of it would take a matter of days and some of it would take up to 8 to 10 days. So again, we waited. That was on the 11th, and on the 12th, that Saturday night, I was watching my 4-month-old nephew while my sister and her husband went on their 10-year anniversary. And he still wasn't quite sleeping through the night, but I had finally gotten him to sleep, and it was late, probably 11:30 at night. I was tired and a little bit weary just from the last couple of days and needed rest. My entire household was asleep, but I was not. And suddenly I could not sleep. And all of the what ifs that could possibly be came to mind. And suddenly I was fearful. I stopped and I said, I'm not going to do this. I am not going to go there. I am not going to think about the what ifs. and I asked God to help me. I felt like I was supposed to grab a pen and paper, my thoughts to God, and so that is what I did. I wasn't even sure that it was going to be legible because I didn't want to wake up my 4-month-old nephew. I didn't turn the light on, so I literally wrote in the dark. But I want to share with you what I wrote down, and this is what I wrote.
Our God isn't limited. He has raised the dead, healed the blind, and made the lame to walk. He is the perfect. Take courage. Don't be swayed by the world's standards. We find our hope in Him alone. Oh, how the enemy loves to stir things up, but we know in whom we believe. I know Him. I know His ways, and they are good, always. My rest is in Him alone. My peace is in Him alone. Why do we fight over such trivial things? And with that, I prayed, and I closed my eyes and went to sleep.
I found that the night before I was preparing the testimony to share with my church family. And like I said, I wasn't even sure that it was going to be legible. But in that moment, God met me. And after that, I was able to go to sleep, and I slept well. After church that day on January 13th, we took Hannah up for prayer, and she was surrounded by the pastor and the elders and their wives. And suddenly, I remembered that this is how we fight our battles. The next day, on January 14th, at 7 o'clock at night, we received the call we were waiting for. There were no scary findings, as the doctor put it, and the bone marrow biopsy was not needed. At that time, we were still waiting on more lab work, but that was the big call we were waiting for. On January 24th, we received word that the rest of the lab work came back normal, and that is my God.
Hallelujah.